Good afternoon, everyone. We are now ready to continue taking evidence. Miss French, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you, sir.
Good. Thank you very much. And you're ready to carry on?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Cameron, thank you very much. Welcome back, Ms. French. I'd like to ask you about approved document B now, please, which is at CLG 50224. Can we go, please, in this document to page 97? Now, I'm going to ask you some questions about this, but in fairness to you, I do understand, and we have noted your evidence in your statements, that you didn't have a detailed understanding of these building regulations. It just confirmed for us. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
In general terms, had you ever seen, or did you ever see this document during the time you were working for Arconic?
No, I didn't.
Had you heard the phrase approved document B during the time you were working for Arconic?
I don't recall I had.
Right. Now, it may not matter very much. If we look at page 97, you can see something called diagram 40. And I'm going to assume you've never seen, or you had during your time at Arconic, never seen this diagram before. Is that right?
No, I hadn't.
Right. Even today, have you ever seen it before?
I have now, but I hadn't at the time.
Right. So just to be clear, you say you have now. You don't mean just now, but before you've come to give evidence.
Sorry, yes. In the last, well, since this happened, then yes, I have seen it since, but not before.
If you look at the bottom row of diagrams on that page, you can see that they're listed D, any building, and E, any building. And the bottom row of diagrams is buildings over 18 metres. And if you match the darker shading to the key at the side, you can see that there's a reference to class 0, national class, as the second box down on the right-hand side. Can you see that?
Yes.
And we've now seen references to class 0 in 2 documents already in this evidence you're giving today. When you were working for Arconic, did you know what class 0, national class, meant?
Not in its truest technical terms, no. I knew it was covered on a Bba certificate, and that's pretty much my understanding of it at the time.
To the extent of your understanding, what did class 0 mean?
It meant that it was a classification for fire, and it was more spread of fire, but that would have been my limited understanding of it.
What did you understand at the time that it signified to customers?
Our BBA's covered was, the BBA was to a class O, and therefore it fell within the necessary regulations.
Leaving the BBA out of it for the moment, just taking the expression class O, as you call it, class 0 as I think it is, what did you understand that meant to a customer reading it, or reading it in a document?
That they could use it within necessary buildings over here.
When you say necessary buildings over here, what do you mean?
That it could be used on buildings in the UK.
Any building?
Yeah, again, I didn't have any understanding of that particular knowledge at the time. So yes, I would have said that.
Right. Did you understand at least this much, that it was relevant to fire performance?
Yes, I did.
What was its relevance to fire performance that you understood?
I can't explain exactly. It's not something that it's not something that I ever really had any discussions with anybody about individual buildings. If I was asked for information, I would pass it on. It's not something I had conversations with. So I didn't look into a lot of the detail on it, and I didn't understand a lot of it.
Did you understand that it indicated performance under or according to a British standard?
Again, it was more to do with the fact that it was on a BBA document rather than a document B. So yes, I knew it was related to a fire classification, but much more than that, no, I didn't have any more understanding of it.
When you say it was related to a fire classification, can I just be a little bit specific? Did you understand that when the phrase class 0 or class O, as you put it, appeared, it indicated, or was supposed to indicate, that the product had been tested to standard BS 476, part 6 and 7?
I wouldn't necessarily have known that specifically if somebody had asked me that at the time. You know, back when I was with the company, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have been able to answer that question.
Were you ever asked by customers if Reynobond PE55 was class 0?
I possibly was. Again, I can't recall exact conversations or times or events that question was asked, but yes, I probably was asked that.
What would you answer to the best of your recollection?
I would have sent them a copy of the certificate, the BBA certificate, so that they could make their own conclusions as to whether it was suitable for them or not.
But if somebody said to you, Ms. French, is Reynobond PE55 class 0 or class O, what would you have answered?
I would have said yes, it was.
Can we then, sticking with this document on the screen, look please at diagram 40. Again, you can see at the bottom there are some notes. I'll come back to the notes in a minute, but the box on the right-hand side says class 0, national class, or class B S3, D2, or better, European class. Now, when you were working for Arconic, did you know anything about European fire testing or European fire classification for products?
No, I knew that obviously Reynobond had European classification certificates for various things, but again, I wouldn't have studied them or necessarily taken note of them.
Well, we will explore in due course what exactly you did know about Reynobond having European fire classification for certain products. But let's approach it a little bit more slowly. During your time at Arconic, had you heard about or of the European EN 13501 classification regime?
I'd heard of it.
Had you heard about class A to class E being the range of classifications within that regime? I
would have been aware of that terminology, yes.
How would you have become aware of that regime?
Just through conversations of hearing other people talking about it and seeing it on certain documents.
I see. Did you ever have any formal training or induction or education about that regime and those classifications within it?
No, I don't believe so.
Now, if sticking with the document on the screen, diagram 40, please, within approved document B, if we can just go back to that, you can see that the European class referred to there is B. Did you understand that in order to obtain a class B under the European system of testing, it would have had to be tested in a facade build-up of some kind?
No, I wouldn't.
Would you understand that the cladding would have to be set up in a rivet fix or a cassette fix with a wall and an insulation? Did you understand that?
No, I wouldn't have been involved in any of that.
If we look at the note, it says, note 1, the national classifications do not automatically equate with the equivalent European classifications. Did you understand that, at least as a general principle?
Yes, I knew that people in the UK only wanted to see the relevant UK documentation and not European certificates.
Right. Did you have any understanding about whether class 0 was equivalent to class B or not equivalent to class B?
No, I had no knowledge of that.
Again, that's a topic we'll come back to in a bit more detail later, just to flag that up with you. But in the meantime, let's look at some product literature, shall we? Let's go to CEP 3061423. Now, this is an iteration of Arconic's Discover New Perspectives brochure. And we believe, looking at it, that it's dated 2008. And I'll show you that in a moment. Before I do, are you familiar with this document?
Yes, I am.
Would you have distributed this kind of document to your customers, do you think?
Yes, I have.
Can we go to page 16? We can see at the very bottom on the left-hand side, up the side, there's a date. Page 16, yes. And at the very bottom on the left, up the side, there's a date which says 08. In fact, it's not actually that way around. It says BARC RBAR 08, or GB, I think, 08. It's quite hard to read. Can you help us whether that signifies the date of issue of this document?
I mean, I can't barely see it. It's sort of cut halfway off, but I think it was, yes.
Yes, I'm trying it a different way. Was this the kind of document that you would have been using to distribute to your customers fairly on in your career at Arconic?
Yes.
And if we go to page 13, back a few pages, please, and track to the right-hand side of the document, you can see that there's a table. The table at the top of the page is called Certification, and immediately underneath that is Fire Certification Europe. And underneath that, on the very first line, it says Europe, and then Reynobond, PE, and then there's a classification BS2D0, certification number RA05 0005A, and the testing organization is CSTB. Can you see that?
Yes.
And in the next line, it says Europe FR for Reynobond, and underneath certification class BS1D0, certification number RA070177 CSTB. Now, if you skip down to the UK entries, just beyond Germany, beyond France and Germany there, you can see UK PE, the two classifications there under Part 7, BS 476 Part 6 and BS 476 Part 7, Class 0 and Class 1. And then for FR, the same again. So there are 4 entries, 2 for PE, 2 for FR there. You see that?
Yes.
And they are certified as numbers 70707 and 70708. And all 4 are done at Warrington Fire Research as the testing organisation. Now, I've shown you that. Now, my question is, first, were you familiar with this part of the document or something like it when you were disseminating it to your customers?
Yeah, I would have seen it. I wouldn't necessarily have understood the technicalities of it, but I certainly am familiar with the setup of it.
Does that tell us that at the time you were using this document, you appreciated that Arconic was making claims about the fire performance of Reynobond, PE and FR in terms of the European classification regime as well as the UK regime?
I wouldn't have had any reason to have questioned it. It would have been a document. I didn't have enough knowledge about the industry as explained, so I certainly wouldn't have been in a position to question anything that was being provided.
No, what I'm really trying to get at is whether, given that this was a document that you would have used with your customers at this time, did you appreciate that Arconic was making representations to its customers, not only about the national fire performance classifications, but also about fire performance of Reynobond, PE and FR in European terms?
Well, as I say, I wouldn't have, if that's what they were saying, if that's what was in the documentation, I wouldn't have had any reason to question it.
Right. Did customers in the UK ever ask you about European classifications?
They possibly did, and again, I would have immediately either referred them to some of the product information sheets, the data sheets, or sent them copies of the BBA.
Would you have referred them to this list of certifications?
Not necessarily in that brochure, but the information would have been in other documents.
Can we take it from this document and the fact that you were using it to disseminate it among your UK customers, that your UK customers were interested not only in the national class certifications for fire, but also the European classifications for fire?
I couldn't say whether they would have been or not. As I said earlier, I'm familiar with the terminology, but it's not something that I would have had a conversation with any customers about. I don't recall conversations with them about European certification.
Do you remember who gave you this document to use with your UK customers?
I would assume it's come from our marketing team.
Who specifically within your marketing team would have given this document for you to disseminate among your UK customers?
I can't remember who would have been doing it at the time in 2000 when it was first issued in 2008 or 9. I can't remember who was there. I can't remember. There was a lady there that was running the marketing for Alcoa at the time, but I can't remember her name.
Justine Boyle.
No, she wasn't there when I was there.
Did it strike you as odd that you were being given a document like this to disseminate and use with your UK customers, which had not only UK national class fire certifications on it, but also the European fire classifications?
It never occurred to me. It genuinely didn't occur to me. As I say, I didn't have enough technical knowledge or background of the industry even to have known whether the information that was in there was right or wrong. So I wouldn't have questioned it.
Can we go to your second statement then, please, at page 5, MET 53162, page 5. And I'd like to just show you what you say at paragraph 20. You say there, I do not recall ever being trained on any specific requirements for the UK. Neither do I recall ever hearing about specific requirements in respect of buildings higher than 18 metres. This did not come up in my discussions with Colin Southgate, and neither do I recall it being discussed during my induction at the annual sales meetings or at any other time during my tenure with Arconic, whether internally or with the various customers with whom I dealt. Those customers were usually industry specialists and architects who I expect to know much more about building regulations and any associated requirements than me. Now, is it right that you had at least some knowledge of what you could sell, what you were allowed to sell to the UK in order to do your job?
Well, my knowledge on the technical side was very limited, as I say. I was basically taking the product that I was being given to go and promote and market in the UK was suitable for the UK market. And so I had never had any reasons to question that. I didn't have the background and the technical knowledge to question it any further.
When you say you were taking that the product was to promote and market in the UK, was suitable for the UK market, was that so regardless of the height of the building? Yeah,
again, I didn't have conversations with customers about the height of buildings or the height it was being used in. I was so much further away from a lot of those conversations that would have been taking place with other people within the chain.
I see. So do we take it from that at no stage when you were selling Reynobond 55 PE into the UK market were you aware of any restriction or qualification on the use of that product at height? In other words, above?
No, I was not aware that there was restrictions.
Right. If you had no understanding of the requirements of the UK regulations, how did you know that it was acceptable to sell PE cord Reynobond 55 in the UK market regardless of height?
Well, as I just explained, I'm working for an organisation like Alcoa. I'd just taken it that I didn't even question, didn't even enter my head that it was or wasn't suitable. As far as I was concerned, it was a product that had been used. They were a big known company, and therefore it was all perfectly suitable for what it needed to do in the UK.
Right. Now, can we turn to the question of combustibility of PE? Can we stay in your second statement, but go to page 7, please? I'd like to look with you at paragraph 28. And at paragraph 28, you say, it's quite a long paragraph, and there's a particular part of it I want to ask you about, but I should give you the whole thing. You say the vast majority of the questions that I received related to the aesthetics and appearance of the product, typically colour and finish, rather than the technical performance characteristics. The decision as to whether to opt for PE or FR core was made by the customer on the basis of the specification to which they were working. Say for explaining to a customer that there were PE and FR variants of Reynobond available. I did not, nor was I in a position to, advise customers on the specific fire performance differences between PE and FR. I do not recall ever advising a customer that they needed a PE or FR core during my time at Arconic. Of course, I appreciate that PE was plastic and was and is flammable. That would have been obvious to anyone, but the PE product was regulated and accredited by external accreditation bodies, for example, the BBA. I also understood that FR provided additional resistance to fire. That was obvious from the name. If a customer were to ask me about the detailed technical differences, I would have referred the query to the technical sales support team. This team is available to provide technical support and assistance to customers and to the sales representatives, etc. I don't think I need the rest. Now, to be very clear, is it right that you understood that PE, polyethylene, was a combustible material?
I understood that it wasn't as fire retardant, yes.
Well, did you understand that it was a combustible material?
I would, at the time, again, it's not something that would have been part of the process of what I was going through, the thinking. So, I mean, when you look back on it, yes, it's combustible, but I wouldn't have known, I didn't think of it in that way at the time.
Well, you say in the middle of the statement, and I read it slowly, that you appreciate that PE was plastic and was and is flammable. That would have been obvious to anyone. Just to be clear, I'm just putting to you whether you understood at the time that PE was a combustible material, or if you like, a flammable material.
Yes.
Now, you of cladding, as you told us before you joined Arconic, did you?
No, I didn't.
And you say it would have been obvious to anyone that PE was, using your word, flammable. Was it obvious to you when you joined Arconic and started marketing Reynobond PE that it was flammable, or did somebody tell you that?
It probably wouldn't have been obvious to me at the time. It would have come from somebody else or general discussions.
Right. So it would have come from somebody else or general discussions. Do you remember having a general discussion or even a specific discussion with a particular person about the combustibility characteristics of a PE core?
I can't recall specific discussions and conversations about it. No, I can't remember specifics in that sense.
So when you say it would have been obvious to anyone in your statement, is that really right?
It's difficult when, you know, obviously very aware of it now. I mean, a lot of people are very aware of flammable materials now, where they weren't necessarily back then. But as I say, I specifically, I don't know whether I was given that guidance or whether I heard about it in general discussions.
Well, really what I'm getting at is whether your statement's correct when you say that it would have been obvious to anyone that the PE product was flammable. Was it something that you immediately observed for yourself without having to be told that because it was obvious, or did you have to be told that by somebody in order to know it?
Well, I think the nature of polyethylene would have been that it was flammable or more flammable.
Maybe that's right, but what did you know yourself? Did you understand from the start that Reynobond PE55 had a flammable core, or was that something that you had to be told by somebody else in order to know it?
I was probably told that by somebody. It's not something I would have known myself.
So when you say in your statement that it would have been obvious to anyone, this is why I'm asking you, is that really correct?
Well, as I say, so yes, I probably had somebody tell me.
Right. So when you say in your statement that would have been obvious to anyone, is that right? Was it obvious to anyone, or was it something that you had to be told?
I think if you were in the industry, it probably was very obvious to everybody, but not, as I say, it would have been clearer to me after the few months of being with the firm, but not necessarily immediately straight as soon as I joined them.
Right. Did you ever have any discussion with any of your customers about the combustible nature of polyethylene as the core of Reynobond 55?
I was there quite a long time, and the subject of fire was becoming more relevant during probably 2013-14, but certainly not at the very beginning, no.
Yes, we'll come to those years later on. Are you telling us that there came a time during your employment at Arconic when the combustible nature of the polyethylene core to Reynobond 55 was the subject of specific discussion between you and customers?
Yes, there was more conversations, there's more awareness being talked about of it than in the market generally than when I first joined them.
Can you remember which customers you discussed the combustible nature of polyethylene core with at any time?
I can't be specific. It would have been one of our regular fabricators. We only worked with a small group of fabricators, so it would have been one or two, a couple of those maybe.
What was the context in which you had those discussions? You remember?
I can't remember. There was some discussions about other fires that were happening later on in, again, I'm not too sure of the date, 2013-14. And there was some discussions about that, but I don't recall specifics.
Now, we asked Jeff Blades of CEP about this subject, and he told us that he'd never discussed the flammability of PE with you. Is that right?
Again, I can't answer that specifically, but I don't recall having discussions with them about it.
Just for our record, that's the reference at day 41, page 39, at lines 8 to 10, where he said he never had a discussion about the flammability of PE with you. And I think you've confirmed that. It's right, isn't it, that CEP was a key fabricator for Arconic, yes? They
were one of our fabricators, yes.
Yes. I asked you whether they were a key fabricator. You say they were one of them, one of a small number. Is that
one of a small number of fabricators, yes.
Is it right that you really did never talk about the combustible nature of PE with Jeff Blades or anybody else at CEP?
Not that I don't recall having any of those discussions. The flammability of ACM was just not discussed. It's not something that was brought up in general conversations.
Can we look at your exhibit DF5 then, please, and go to pages 48 and 49. This is at MET 30's53173. And I'd like to start at the foot of page 48, Ms. French, please, with an email from, let's just wait for it to come up. MET 30's53173. And if we go to the bottom of page 48, we can see that there is an email from a person called Rica de la Cruz of Arup on Monday, September the 12th, 2011, to you, re stainless steel composite panels. If we please go to the top of page 49, we can see that they ask you this: Debbie, thanks for looking into this. Could you please provide me with some technical details regarding the FR core, particularly how it compares to the PE core? We would like to make sure that we can specify this without problems. Looking forward to hearing from you soon. Now, if we get, that's the question that you were asked. If we go back to page 48 and go to the top of that page, we can see that if you just scroll down a little bit further to the bottom, towards the bottom of that page, you send the email on to Claude Verlet on Thursday, the 15th of September 2011, and you say, "Hi Claude, have these two documents showing the details of FR and PE core. Are they something I can send out to customers? See email below. I am unsure as they give a lot of detail. Could you let me know and see if we can't, do you have any other documents that I can supply Arab, please?" And his response to you on the 23rd of September 2011 is, "Oh my Lord," in capital letters, bold, 3 exclamation marks. "Where do you get that from? Question mark, question mark, question mark. For sure you're not," capital letters, bold, "allowed to diffuse to the customer those documents. The best way to answer is to speak about difference of fire classification on the panels containing FR compared to those ones containing PE." And then if we scroll up a little bit higher, Mr. Verlet comes, I say back to you. He sends you another email, it looks like, on the same day, 23rd of September 2011, saying, "FR core is done with 30% organic part and 70% mineral part. PE is only organic. As organic is the material that is going to burn in case of a fire, FR is better." Now, it's clear from this, and do you accept that at this stage, September 2011, you knew, even if only from this exchange, that there was a different fire classification for FR from that which applied to PE?
Yes.
And you discovered, presumably from this classification, from this email run from Claude Verlet, that PE would burn.
Yes.
If you had to have this explained to you by Claude Verlet, wouldn't it follow that your own customers would need to have it explained to them in turn?
Yes, they would have done.
Did you ever explain to your customers in terms that PE would burn?
I don't recall specifically explaining that to them.
Was that not something that you felt it important to explain to your customers?
It's not something I explained to them. If I'd been asked the question, I would have explained it, or I would have sought the right information to go and be able to explain it to them.
How did you understand, or what did you understand from Mr. Verlet's email about how PE would burn if ignited?
I can't remember. I can't remember what the events of the conversation were after that string of emails.
We can see the terms or tone in which Mr. Verlet responded to you, which was with capital letters and bolds and quite a lot of punctuation. Can you explain why he reacted in the way he did to your question?
Not specifically, no. This particular, from what I can recall, the project that we were talking about there was for a project in somewhere else abroad. It wasn't in the UK. So the architect were in the UK, but the project itself was going to be in another country.
Why would it make a difference that the architect was in another country if PE would burn the same in that other country as it would in the UK?
Whether the regulations were slightly different, as I say, I can't recall. I genuinely can't recall why. I haven't had any conversation, or didn't have conversations with customers about the combustibility of it.
We saw, we can get back to it if you like, that Mr. Verlet explained to you the difference in the makeup between FR core on the one hand and PE core on the other. Was that something that you ever explained to your customers? No,
it's not something that I was asked. It's not something that I would have talked to them about. I certainly wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that. I just say I haven't got the technical knowledge to be able to do that. I would have sought further advice to be able to do it if I'd been asked.
Sorry. Why would you not have told your customers that FR had a 70% mineral core, whereas PE had a 100% organic core and would burn? Why not tell them that so that they could make their decisions on an informed basis?
It's not something that was ever discussed. It's conversations about fire were just not something that happened. They weren't part of the everyday discussions. It didn't come from any part of the process of people that were involved in the chain.
I'd like to ask you about the size of the UK market. Can we look at your, or stay with perhaps your second statement and go to page 9, please, and look at paragraph 43 together. So, sorry, 33. Paragraph 33 on that page. You say in paragraph 33, Arconic had a very small share of the UK market. I would estimate that it was probably the 4th biggest supplier of ACM for facade purposes behind a Reynobond, produced by 3A Composites, Alpolic, produced by Mitsubishi Chemicals, and Alucoil, produced by Larsen. Each of these competitors sold greater amounts of PE ACM to the UK market. I cannot recall the exact sales volumes or market shares, but as noted above, the UK was a relatively small market for Arconic. It sold greater volumes of product elsewhere, for example, France and the UAE. Is it fair to say that the UK was a minor country for sales of Reynobond?
Yes, it was.
Do people in Merksheim therefore pay less attention to UK than other markets like France or the UAE?
I can't answer that. That would have to be a question for them.
Looking at that, it appears that Arconic had a great deal of competition in the United Kingdom. Is that right?
Yes, we did.
Did you keep a close eye on what Arconic's competitors were doing?
I was very aware of them in the UK. Yes, very aware of them.
Would it be fair to say that you kept a close eye on a Reynobond manufactured by 3A?
Yes, they were the largest.
Yes. Now, to come back to a point raised by the chairman earlier, there was a price difference between Reynobond's PE and Reynobond's FR offering, wasn't there?
Yes.
And the extent of the price difference that you gave us earlier, was the PE core Reynobond competitively priced against the competition?
We were competitive, but not in all cases.
What about FR? Was FR competitively priced?
It very much depended on project by project basis, but I can't really remember exactly, but I think we were probably more expensive than FR on FR.
That sounds from both of those answers. For PE, competitive, but not in all cases, and for FR, it depended on project by project. That actually there wasn't a fixed price. The price would depend upon the deal that you managed to do with the fabricator. Is that right?
Yeah, I would seek prices I had general guidance from Merksheim in terms of the pricing that we could or couldn't offer.
You say general guidance, does that mean you had a range within which you could price at your discretion?
Yeah, so PE, for example, because we were selling that all the time, I had a level that I could sell to without having to go to Merksheim, and other prices I would have to seek that from, or at least get some sort of agreement from Merksheim.
Could you say, when you say a level, you mean there's a floor below which you could not go without authority?
Yeah, there was nothing written down in terms of, a minimum and a maximum, and I could operate within that minimum and maximum, but there was a general market price for certain colours, and anything generally outside of that, I would seek advice or at least get some reassurance that I could do that.
Give us some idea of the range for PE, in rough terms.
Gosh, back then it would have been 25. So it could have been anywhere between sort of 22 right up to 28, 30 pounds a square metre, depending on the colour, the size of the project.
Right, so almost about 30%.
Yeah, and again, it would just depend on lots of different situations at the time.
Do you have any price advantage to the competition if you sold PE core as opposed to FR core?
Sorry, did we have?
Yes.
No.
Now, I want to ask you about the resources available to you and how you would go about sharing information in Arconic. So a different topic. And I'd like to start with the subject of the toolbox. And in that, to begin with Claude Schmidt's understanding of the way he says information was communicated within Arconic. Can we please go to his witness statement at page 15? This is MET 53187, page 15. And on that page, I'd like to go to paragraph 48. It's at the bottom of the page, and he says, In relation to awareness within Arconic of the results of fire performance testing and certification, a number of people within Arconic would have been aware, including the sales team and the technical sales support team. Members of the sales team would be aware of the results as they're made available to them through an online system referred to as the page toolbox. Claude Vernet and the technical sales support team would upload to the toolbox a new or updated classification report or certification and would notify the sales team via email of any such changes. Such emails were sent to two mail distribution lists: RAF Liste Commerciale Interne, which includes all members of the sales and marketing department that are based in Merksheim, including those working in internal sales, outside sales, and technical support, and RAF Liste Commerciale Externe, which includes all members of the sales and marketing department that are based outside of Merksheim and either employed by Arconic or are its agents, including, for example, Deborah French and Vince Meekins. Now, I'll pause there. Just looking at the toolbox question, am I right to understand that this was an online database, if you like, of technical documents?
Yes, I believe so.
Who was in charge of keeping it up to date, do you know?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Who was in charge of emailing the recipients in those lists when there was a change or update to the toolbox? Do you know?
I don't know, I'm afraid.
You have easy access to the toolbox yourself.
I'm trying to recollect the details of the exact details and how we used the toolbox. I can't recall.
Was it something that you would have to access yourself from your computer? If you wanted to look at it, you would access it by clicking on a link, or you regularly sent a link to look at? Do you remember?
I honestly can't remember the details of the toolbox at all. I'm really struggling to recall details of the toolbox.
Well, forgive me for the next question. Do you remember getting any prompts, email, telephone prompts to look at the toolbox from anybody in Arconic?
I don't recall being on any prompts to look at specifically at the toolbox. I remember being sent emails, receiving emails from the email list that you just mentioned in that statement, so which I would have been included on, but I don't remember. I don't recall or remember a toolbox.
Did anybody ever give you any training or other kinds of education about the toolbox and how to use it?
I honestly can't recall the toolbox at all. I'm sorry. I'm not being difficult here. I don't recall it.
Did you keep your own copies of technical documents in either hard copy or on your computer that you would then send to customers when needed?
Yes, I did have hard copies of documents that I would have kept on my own laptop, on my own, I say my work laptop, yes.
Do you remember an occasion when those documents were amended or updated?
No, I wouldn't have, no, because they weren't automatically connected to a system at Merksheim. They were just sat on my hard drive on my laptop.
Do you remember an occasion on which you were informed that the documents that you had been revised or updated?
I remember receiving emails specifically giving updates on certain documents, but I really don't remember a toolbox function. I had a CRM system that we worked on, but I don't remember a toolbox.
Okay. So can we take it from that you were entirely reliant, reactive to being told that there were changes to technical documents, as opposed to being encouraged to find them in the toolbox?
Yes, I do recall getting emails of that nature.
And I see. And who would you speak to, or who would you be contacted by in the event that there was a revision or an update to one of those documents?
That would have come from the technical team.
technical team itself or inside sales?
It could have been both. It could have been both, depending on what it was. I remember getting documents from both inside sales. Generally, inside sales passed information on, and then I would have had stuff come from the technical team as well.
Right. Was there anything to stop you sending out material to your customers that was out of date or inapplicable to that customer?
No, there wouldn't have. There was nothing. No, there was no stop anywhere for me not to send that out.
Did it ever occur to you why it was that you were sending out to your customers documents that may have been many years out of date or of many years of antiquity, origin?
No, again, I would have taken them that they were still valid if I hadn't been sent information to, update it. I would have continued to send it out.
Do you remember any occasion on which you yourself accessed the toolbox to get a document?
I can't recall. I'm not saying that I didn't, but I can't recall the toolbox. But I'm not saying that I didn't have access to it, but I really can't recall it.
I'd like to show you what Mr. Verley says about this. Can we go, please, to, or rather, I'd like to show you a document which he exhibits, which is part 6 of his exhibits at MET 30535158, please. At page, underscore P06. I'll read that again. MET 30535158 underscore P06 at page 156. And this is a presentation given by Mr. Verley's team, as we understand it. Now we can see from this page that this is a document relating to a sales meeting in June 2013. NRE toolbox, a way to improve your reactivity. First of all, do you remember being at such a sales meeting?
Again, I have no recollection of that one specifically, but I did attend all of them. There wasn't any that I didn't attend.
So can we take it that even though you don't recall this one specifically, you attended this one? Yes.
Yeah.
And if we go on in this presentation, you can see that it's all about the toolbox. We can see that there's a slide at page 160, four pages on, which has the heading Challenges and Next Steps Action Plan. Challenges and next steps, update all obsolete documents, old logo, new versions, action plan, end of year. Update day after day this tool with new certifications, test results or standard answers. Integrate environmental standards, LEED, EPD. First, did you understand that there were indeed, or may have been, indeed, obsolete documents in the toolbox?
No, I wouldn't have necessarily been aware of that.
If you were at this meeting, as you say you were, although you can't specifically recall it, you would have understood that the toolbox did contain contained obsolete documents which needed to be updated by the end of 2013. Yes?
Yeah. Yes.
When you learned that there were or may have been obsolete documents which needed to be updated in the toolbox, what did you do?
I honestly don't recall what I did.
Did this prompt you to look in the toolbox and see what it was that might be updated to make sure that whatever documents you were disseminating to your customers would now be updated or had not grown obsolete?
Again, I don't recall whether I did or didn't.
Do you remember whether there was a plan to update the toolbox and then keep it updated after this time?
No, I don't recall. I know I'm being very vague, but I really don't recall much about the toolbox at all.
Right. So you were at this sales meeting, and you can't recall it, but I'm just trying to understand what your thinking was at the time. You're told, as we can see here, that one of the challenges and next steps were to take the toolbox, which is of course the subject of this entire slide, and update it. Was this not an occasion on which you would ask yourself, I wonder whether any of the documents that I've been sending to customers are obsolete and now need updating? Did you not ask yourself that question?
Possibly not. No, I would have just waited for that to have happened from the technical team, and they would have either advised me or sent me what needed to be replaced.
But wasn't the purpose of the toolbox a two-way street which required you, or at least invited you, to look inside it from time to time to make sure that whatever was in there corresponded with what you were sending to customers?
Yes.
So how?
I can't answer that question. So I can't recall I recall very little about the toolbox. So I can't remember whether I went into it, whether I didn't go into it, whether I updated from it, or whether I didn't. I genuinely cannot recall much about the toolbox. Now,
we've just seen Claude Schmidt's evidence in paragraph 48 of his statement that I read to you about the RAF Liste Commerciale Externe. I don't need to go back to that unless you want me to, and I'm happy to do that. But he says that that email group would have included you. You remember we saw that.
Yes.
Is that right, first of all?
Yes.
So is it right that you would receive email communications through the RAF Liste Commerciale Externe?
Yes.
Do you understand that, or did you understand at the time that everybody external to Merxheim would receive emails via that group?
Yes.
That might include sales representatives in the UAE or Germany, Spain. Yes?
Yes.
You were nodding.
Yes.
Do you know who it was who made the decision to send which emails to the RAF Liste Commerciale Externe group?
No, I don't.
Who would typically send emails into that group? Do you remember? Typically.
It would have been the technical team or people higher up in the management team.
And do you know what criteria, as you don't, but can you tell us perhaps what criteria they would apply to decide whether that email or that message should be sent to the RAF Liste Commerciale Externe?
No, I wouldn't have had any access to that.
Right. Now, Mr. Schmidt also says that there was a list, and I think you've confirmed this yourself, called RAF Liste Commerciale Interne. Were you aware of that list?
I probably saw it on emails, but I wouldn't have been able to get in to see who was in it.
That was people in Merxheim, was it, like Grenfell de Rantanger and Peter Fröhlich?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
You accept? I mean, I'm asking you. Yes.
Yes.
I want to ask you then about sales meetings at Merxheim, building on that. Can I ask you to go to your second statement, please, at page 2? I'd like to look at paragraph 9 with you, please, Ms. French. You say there, I would typically visit, this is the bottom of the page, I would typically visit Arconic's Merxheim site once a year in order to attend the annual sales meeting, and at other times on an ad hoc basis to show customers around the site or to work with the inside sales team on particular issues. The inside sales team would provide administrative support for my activities, including the supply of samples, processing orders, and arranging and monitoring the shipment of product. Grenfell de Rantanger was my primary contact at the inside sales team at the time I became involved in the Grenfell Tower project. Grenfell's duties would be covered when she was away from the office by Marie-Claude Jordan. And then you say at paragraph 10, the annual sales meetings at Merxheim gave me an opportunity to meet with Arconic sales representatives from around Europe and to receive a general update on developments in the market and about Arconic's products. These meetings would typically include a technical update on the products given by Claude Verlet, who managed the technical sales support team at Arconic, covering possible new developments. For example, toward the end of my time at Arconic, it was developing a Reynobond A2 product and other matters, including in respect of certification. This is dealt with in more detail below from paragraph 19. Now, before we explore that in a little bit of detail, you can take it from me that Claude Verlet's evidence is that these meetings would usually occur twice a year. And that's his statement at paragraph 125, page 36. Do you agree with that? Or do you not know?
I certainly remember them being once a year. We probably sometimes had them twice a year, but I definitely remember them being once a year.
I mean, he says they were twice a year, usually twice a year. Might you be mistaken that they were annual only, that they occurred twice a year?
Yes, possibly I'm mistaken and I only recall them being annually, but yes, possibly.
Or is it the case perhaps that you didn't attend all of them?
I don't recall missing any. There's no reason why I would have missed any. I don't recall them being twice a year, every year that I was there, but I definitely remember being there every single year.
Now, turning to the question of the presentations at these sales meetings, would you agree that these presentations were on the subject of developments in the work of the technical sales support team?
Yes.
They were likely to be of general relevance.
They were general, so each regional sales manager for each country would do a short presentation, an update on their market. We would hear from some of the development teams within Merksheim, and we would hear from some of the internal people occasionally, and then we would also hear from the technical team.
Yes, and when you say that the meetings would typically include a technical update on the products given by Claude Verlet, that's right, is it? They were technical, yes. Were they?
Yeah, he would give a general overview of all sorts of different things that were going on at the time.
Right, and you also say that he would give you information or a presentation in respect of certification as well.
Yes.
Yes. Now, in your second statement at page 5, paragraph 19, you come back to this point. You elaborate on this point a little bit more. And paragraph 19, you say that you would attend annual sales meetings at Merksheim, which would include a technical update presented by Claude Verlet. And we've already seen that. You say at the end of that paragraph, as I think we've already seen, I did not think that the European testing regime was relevant to the UK, and so these updates were not a focus of mine. Now, I've shown you some of the Arconic sales literature, which made claims about European classifications. And I've also shown you approved document B, which I know you didn't see at the time, which referred also to the European fire classifications. Can I ask you, why did you think that, as you say here, paragraph 19, why did you think that the European testing regime was not relevant to the UK?
That was my knowledge at the time, that it wasn't as relevant, that people in the UK wanted the UK certifications and not the European ones.
Did anybody ever specifically tell you that the European classification system or test results were not relevant to UK customers?
I don't recall, no.
Can we take it from paragraph 19, and maybe this is an unfair reading, but please help me. Is it right that you would ignore anything that you were told about European fire classification, test results, or the regime itself in relation to Reynobond 55 because you didn't think that it applied to your customer base?
A lot of those discussions were very focused on other countries and the effects that those testing certificates were having on other countries. Other countries didn't have their own certifications, but we had certain certifications for the UK. So my focus was on any amendments or updates that went on those documents and not the European ones, specifically in terms of any changes to the BBA, for example.
So in these meetings, when European fire classification test results and the regime was discussed, did you listen or did you switch off?
No, I didn't switch off, but I was listening, but I wouldn't have necessarily thought about whether there was any implications or whether I needed to go and seek further assistance over changes to any European certifications. I would have done if it had been to do with the BBA, for example.
Now, going back to these annual or perhaps twice yearly sales meetings, you say to the extent fire testing was covered. Do you remember whether fire testing was actually covered as a specific topic during those sales meetings?
I'm pretty certain they were in some context, yes.
What was that context?
I can't recall the context of it though, but I'd be very surprised if they weren't.
Were you ever shown any documents or reports or presentations about fire testing or classification for the products you were selling at any of those meetings?
I don't specifically recall that, but again, I would be surprised if they weren't, but I don't specifically recall.
Continuing with Mr. Verley's evidence, and going back to his statement, please, page 35. This is MET 30-53190, page 35. Can I just ask you to look at paragraph 119? Just to confirm one thing, please. He says there, in paragraph 119, at the beginning of that paragraph, the technical sales support team also provided information to customers and third parties when queries were raised with the team directly or via the Arconic sales teams. And we also met on occasion with competitors to discuss matters including fire performance. Is that correct? Is what he says there correct? Best of your knowledge.
Yes.
So is it right that a salesperson would be able to refer a customer's technical query to the technical sales support team?
We could direct them into the sales technical team directly, yes.
And when the answer came back, did the answer come back through you to the customer, or would the technical sales support team generally talk to the customer direct and cut you out?
It depends on the nature of it. Sometimes that did happen. Sometimes customers did have direct telephone calls with the sales technical team, and I wouldn't always be copied in, but not very often.
I'm going to turn to a different topic, which is marketing strategy in the early years, in your very early time at Arconic. Now, I'm going to show you a document that is before your time, which you may very well not have seen. But let's see how we go with it. It's in Claude Verley's exhibit, part 13, MET 30-53158_P13 at page 162. And it's a visit report, UK meeting in Luton, dated the 21st of March 2006. And you can see that it's written by Didier Scheidecker. The date of the visit is, as I say, the 21st of March 2006. And a number of people were present, including Mr. Verler, as the penultimate set of initials under copy, as you can see there. Just looking at that document on the screen, is it a document that you would have seen at the time in the early days of your employment by Cornier for Alcoa, Arconic?
I don't recall seeing that, no.
At the time, I think it's right, isn't it, that Guy Scheidecker was the Director of Sales and Marketing?
Yeah, he was the sales manager, I believe, his title. Guy Scheidecker was the sales director at that time.
Right. We can also see that, if we get back to the document, that Colin Southgate was present at that meeting. He's, I think, CSO. If we go to page 164, please, in this document, we find item number 5, technical tools. And underneath that, it says, it represents also a very important point on our differentiation policy. The competition is always higher, customers are squeezing prices, and therefore these technical tools can help us to have advantages and arguments. And then if you look at the third bullet point down, BBA approval, it says this: we have always more and more products coming in the public housing and private development segment. We have here a project of several 10,000 square meters in discussion. It could represent in 2006, 50% of the market, means 70 to 80,000 square meters, exclamation mark. In the segment, we always have to show the official certification from the BBA. Action, and then there are 2 bullet points. Can we organize to have a BBA certification based on our cassette approval by the CSTB? How quick, which costs, which condition? That KH35 is a key system on the market, a real trend. What are the, and you need to go over the page, conditions to have it BBA approved? Now, my question there is, first of all, when you started at Arconic, were you made aware of any strategy on Arconic's part to target public housing in the UK?
No, I wasn't.
Were you told that to target your market, whatever it was, Arconic would need a BBA certificate?
I don't recall. I can't answer that with certainty because I don't recall those sort of questions, those sort of topics. I'm trying to remember if the BBA was already in existence when I started, but again, I cannot recall.
The expression phrase KH35, can you explain what that was?
That was some typical details of a system that was part of the, I can't remember whether it was I think it was a cassette system, one of the cassette systems that Alcoa had designed at the time, that would be used in other markets, but not necessarily in the UK, but they would generally, UK fabricators would be making their own systems of similar nature.
Yes, thank you. Can we go to CEP 306149 then, please? This is a piece of Arconic literature on the KH35 system. And you can see that it is for Reynobond. So system KH35 is a Reynobond system, yes?
Yes.
And it's described just under system KH35 there on the page as a cassette system horizontal layout, yes?
Yes.
And there are two other languages as well, French and German. There's a diagram there, which you can see, which shows a cassette panel and which indicates how it affixes to the substructure. You can see that there. And at the bottom under the diagram, you see that there's a caption, version 2008, right at the very bottom. Can you see?
Yes.
Yes. Can we take it from that this document was dated, created in 2008?
Yeah, I can only take it that it was.
And if we look, and I'll show you a little bit more of the document. If we look at page 2, you can see an image of a cassette with a breakaway bubble with some details in it. And if that's blown up a bit further, you can see that the Reynobond architecture is specifically identified as the rain screen there. Yes. That's RB55 in cassette, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Now, having shown you that, a number of questions about it. First, did you provide this document to your customers, do you think?
There was a fabrication document which had that system and various other systems in it, and yes, I would have passed that on to fabricators.
Right, but I'm asking you about this document. Did you provide this document as either standalone or part of a suite of product literature which you gave to your customers?
Yes, I would have sent that. I can't see the exact document, the whole document, whether it's just one page, whether it's just that KH35. I certainly provided details of KH35. And
would you tell customers that the KH35 system was an option for them to have? In other words, Reynobond could be fixed as a cassette system.
Yes, most customers didn't buy any of the Reynobond systems because they had their own tested systems that they manufactured themselves, so they had no need for the Reynobond design systems. I see.
So this is a Reynobond, you say, system. What was comprised in the system KH35?
So we could also provide Merckstein could also provide the framing behind the Reynobond panel as well. But again, that wasn't something we ever sold in the UK. Customers had their own tested and designed systems. Each fabricator would have their own that they used. They didn't need KH35.
I follow. So I think what you're telling us is that KH35 was not just the cassette fix, not just the panel fabricated into a cassette, but included a system fixing as well.
It included the simple framing structure that went behind it.
What about the substrate?
I don't believe so, no. It was just the simple framing that the Reynobond went on to start with.
Now, did this presentation document that we're looking at here ever change in the years after 2008?
I don't recall that it did.
There's no indication in this document that we've been able to see that the Reynobond shown here was PE or FR. Was this brochure to be used with either product, PE or FR?
I believe so, yes.
And when you did, well, did you ever successfully sell this product in connection with a KH35 system in the UK?
I don't recall ever selling any. As I say, customers had their own, so I don't recall selling any. No.
Even if you didn't sell any, when you used this document as part of your sales pitch, if you like, or sales process, were you ever asked any questions by customers about the fire performance of the panels forming part of the KH35 cassette system?
Not that I recall, no.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn to a different topic. We're probably 5 minutes ahead of the break. I'm happy to start the topic and break at 3:15. It may be a convenient moment now, I don't mind.
Well, it might suit you better to take a break before you start a topic, mightn't it?
Probably would, yes.
All right, well then, we'll take a break there, a little on the early side, Miss French, but probably not unwelcome anyway. So we'll stop now. We'll resume at 3:30, please. And in the meantime, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it.
Okay.
All right, and we'll see you again at 3:30.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. We're now ready to continue, so I'm going to check that Miss French can hear me and see me.
Yes, I can. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Miss French, and I hope you're ready to carry on.
Yes, thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Ms. French, welcome back. I'd like to ask you some questions now about the BBA certificate from 2008 and start with what you understood about the role of the BBA certificate. You told us a little bit about that already. We've already seen, I think, that some of your evidence and your answers are along the lines that your customers would ask for it, and indeed that was the only thing most customers did ask for. Is that fair? Is that right? That's
a general fair sum up, yes.
And we've seen the 2006 Luton meeting note that you weren't at, that there was discussion within Arconic, not involving you, that the BBA certificate was essential to marketing in the UK. When you arrived at Arconic, did you understand that the BBA certificate was essential to marketing Reynobond 55 in the UK?
I didn't understand it in the way that you've put that question, but I understood that the BBA was an important document, but not necessarily in the way that you posed your question.
Well, what was wrong with the, rather than asking you what was wrong with the question, let me try it again. When you arrived at Arconic and started working at Arconic, you understood that the BBA document was an important document. How important was that document to your sales efforts?
I understood that it was the main document that people would look for when buying the product.
Right. Do I understand it that you didn't know what the British Board of Agreement did or what a BBA certificate was before somebody at Arconic told you?
No, I had never had any reason to deal with them or knew anything about it.
Who was it at Arconic who instructed you or educated you about the importance of the BBA certificate?
I can't remember the exact details about it, but and I can't remember the exact details of how it came up in conversation or whether it was part of my initial training. I can't recall.
Did anybody explain to you what the British Board of Agreement did?
It would have been, again, I can't remember those exact conversations, but it would have been explained that we had one. But I don't know whether I had that exact explanation. I can't remember.
Who would you have had a discussion about the BBA certificate with when you first started at Arconic?
I'm thinking it was probably while I was having my initial training with the sales technical team, which would have been Claude at the time.
I see. And did Claude Verlet, or if it wasn't him, somebody else, tell you that the BBA certificate was, so that you put it, the most important document for your sales efforts in the UK?
I can't recall whether we had that exact conversation along those exact lines. But I knew over a period of time that it was an important tool.
Did you understand that the BBA certificate would be telling customers, those who read it, very important information about technical matters?
Yeah, I got to know that that's what the certificate was there for, but I can't recall whether I was specifically told that at the time when I joined.
So did you understand it not only to be a marketing tool, something that would open the door to customers, but also an important document because it contained technical data for those customers?
Yes.
Now, when you joined, do you remember that there was a project going on with the BBA to obtain a certificate for Reynobond 55 panels?
No, I don't remember.
Can we look at Claude Verlet's exhibits, part 16, please, at MET 3053158 _ P16, page 165. This is an email chain from December 2007 through to January 2008. Can we please go to the second email from the top on that page? It's an email from Claude Verlet to you and Colin Southgate, dated the 2nd of January 2008. And he says in the second line, can I ask you to read the attached document and to send me any comments ASAP? And there is an attachment, and take it from me that Claude Verlet attached a draft of the BBA certificate or certification 08/4510. And if we look at the top of the page, you replied to him on the 2nd of January 2008 and to Colin Southgate. Good morning, Claude, you say. Happy New Year to you. I've had a look through the draft and it all looks okay to me, but Colin may have other comments. Take care, Debs. And there's your name at the bottom, Deborah French. When you received the request from Claude Verlet to look at the draft BBA certificate, what did you think were his reasons for asking you in particular for your comments?
It was possibly more to do with the English, the way that the English had been written rather than comments. I was often asked to look at the way documents had been worded when they were translating from different languages and it was coming back into English. So I think it was probably that, and certainly not the technical side of it.
But did you think that what you were being shown was a translation?
No. I'm just saying that he wanted to probably look at whether the set out of the English was as we would want it in that document, and that it was, because he wouldn't have been able to see whether it was worded or reading right in the way that we would probably have wanted in the UK. So I often got asked to look at documents of that nature, marketing documents and so forth.
So can I take it from that answer that what he wanted from you wasn't any commentary on the accuracy necessarily of the technical data in it, but really the language used in it, so as to make that language clear to customers who would read it?
Yes, it wouldn't have been technical because I wouldn't have been able to give it.
And is the reason he was asking you, as you've suggested it, because you as the salesperson, and perhaps Mr. Southgate as well, would be the people issuing this document to customers and therefore expected to be able to answer questions about it in the first instance?
Yes.
When you, had you ever seen a BBA certificate before this moment?
No, I hadn't.
Did you realise at the time that this was the first BBA certificate that Arconic had obtained or was in the process of obtaining for Reynobond 55?
I don't honestly recall. I can't answer that with any certainty whether I knew that it was the first one or whether it was an update. I can't answer that.
When you said, as we can see from the email, it all looks okay to me, what did you mean by that? What looked okay?
I can't remember. I honestly don't know, other than I'm just saying that it would possibly be that the wording and the way that the English was reading was how it would normally be read in the UK, and that's what he was asking me to look at. I wouldn't have been able to comment on any of the technical detail behind it at all.
When you say the way the English was reading was how it would normally be read in the UK, if this was the first time you'd ever seen a BBA certificate, what experience did you have about the way a BBA certificate would normally be read that would qualify you to answer his question?
Well, none then.
Right. So when you say normally be read, what do you mean?
Just the way that some of the words are put together and the way that a sentence would generally read. I can't recall it. I've got no recollection of it, and I'm just saying that's possibly what I was asking, what I was doing.
When you say normally read, and I'm sorry to sound pedantic about this, but do you mean normally read to an ordinary English reader, a lay reader, or normally read to a sales representative, or normally read to somebody with technical knowledge about the technical matters contained in the certificate?
Well, I couldn't say whether it was going to be written whether it was reading in a technical way, because I wasn't technically astute enough to know whether that was right. I can only say that it was just to check that there was no spelling mistakes, or that generally, in terms of the language that was in there, that it was okay.
do I take it from all of these answers that you didn't check the contents of the draft against any document?
I can't recall whether I would have done or not.
For example, did you check the document against approved document B?
No, I wouldn't have done that.
Did you check the document against any test data?
No, I wouldn't have done that.
Did Mr. Verley give you any documents against which to check the BBA certificate?
I don't recall because I don't remember receiving it.
Did you read the technical claims made in the document for Reynobond 55?
I don't recall because I can't recall that far back and that specifically receiving that email and that document.
Now, let's look at your second statement, please, at page 4. Second statement, page 4, paragraph 17, please. You say there, at some point, in the second line, you say, at some point during my employment, Claude explained that customers in the UK might be interested in receiving a copy of the certificate issued by the British Board of Agreement, BBA, relating to the Reynobond product. I do not remember when this was. As far as I can recall, this was the first time that I'd ever heard of the BBA or the certificates that it issues. In the event, the BBA certificate was the only document that most of Arconic's customers in the UK ever specifically asked for. And then at paragraph 18 at the bottom of that page, you say, I do not recall reading the certificate in any detail at the time and do not recall ever discussing fire certification in the context of the BBA certificate. First of all, at paragraph 17, when you say at some point during my employment, was that at the point when he sent you the draft BBA certificate in late December, early January 2007, 2008 for your comment?
Honestly, I can't remember. I don't know. I mean, it was literally a few months after I'd started.
Right. When you wrote this statement, did you not recall the fact that he had asked you specifically to comment on the BBA certificate at that time?
No, that's the first time I've seen that email.
When I've just today, when I
Yes.
Is that right? Now, when you say in paragraph 18 that you don't recall reading the certificate in any detail, can you explain why you told Claude Verler that you'd read through the draft and told him that it looked okay?
I don't recall, and I can't answer that.
Because it looks as if you did read it through in detail.
I can't remember reading it, and I can't answer the question.
Well, can we proceed on the basis from the response that you gave him at the time, that you had read it through and it looked okay, that you did read the BBA certificate through in detail, even if you didn't check or double check the technical claims made in it?
With only having just seen what a BBA was, I wouldn't have been able to have understood a lot of the information that was in there. I don't know why I've put that onto an email, why my comments are on there. And I certainly don't recall looking at it and can't answer the question any further than that.
Well, just help me with this, if you would, Ms. French. Looking at that email that we've just seen, even though you can't actually remember the process of receiving it and looking at it, do you think it's likely that you did, in fact, receive it, read it at some level or other, and send the comment back?
Yes, I've obviously received it, and I would have looked at it and then sent a comment back.
Yes.
Whether I've looked at and understood all the technicalities in there, probably not.
Right. Well, that's helpful. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to be clear, when you were writing your statement, are you as sure as you can be that you weren't shown the email that I've just shown you now?
I'm pretty certain I haven't seen it. I don't recall seeing it.
I mean, would you accept this? That it would be difficult for you to say what you've said in your statement here and sworn to today, unless you had been shown that email, or if you had been shown that email, I should say.
Yes, but I don't recall seeing it.
Let's look at the certificate. Well, we will. Let me just ask you about the understanding of it. Is it right that, given that this was an important new document intended by Arconic to be used as part of the sales process for Reynobond 55 in the UK by you, you would have wanted to understand the certificate at some level of detail?
Yes.
And that would be logical, wouldn't it? Because if every time you were asked a question by a customer about the contents of the certificate, you would need to give some kind of answer. Otherwise, you'd be back and forth to Claude Verlet, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Did Claude Verlet ever organise any kind of training session for you about what this document does and says?
I don't recall specifically about the BBA in terms of just a meeting regarding that, no.
Was this document ever discussed at any of the sales meetings that you went to at Werksheim?
It would have been brought up in some form or another, but again, I really can't remember whether they were brought up in specific country meetings. Yearly meetings. I don't know.
Even though you can't remember the details, which I understand, can you remember the context in which discussion of the BBA surfaced at these sales meetings?
No, the conversations I do recall were around the renewal, or the auditing of a BBA that was done, like an auditing every 12 months or 2 years of a BBA document. That's as much knowledge as I have of it. So the subject of the auditing is one thing. That wasn't relevant, though, was it, to how you would use the document in making a sale? No, but that's the only time I would recall it, was if it was going to be discussed in a meeting. That's the only time I would recall it being discussed in a meeting where all the other countries were involved, if there was an amendment to it, or there was some other reason why they needed to specifically raise it.
Do you remember whether there ever was discussion about an amendment to the BBA certificate?
No, I don't recall any, only the general audits that were going on with it.
What was the gist of the discussions? Can you help me about the BBA certificate in the context of the general audits?
I didn't get involved in those audits, so I really weren't involved in it. All I knew was that I'd get an email sometimes to say that the BBA were going to be carrying out an audit on the certificate, and then I would be sent afterwards. I would then be told it was okay, and I'd be sent another copy of it.
What was the purpose of you being told about the audits? Do you know?
Just for my knowledge, I suppose, but I didn't engage with the BBA on any of that, and I was just notified that there was going to be an audit taking place.
Right. Okay. Can we look at your second witness statement, please, at page 12? I'd like to go to paragraph 43. And you say here at paragraph 43, if we can just have that enlarged, you say, my knowledge of the requirements for the purposes of fire performance was extremely limited. In the UK, I understood that customers often requested the product's BBA certificate, and I knew this certificate made reference to Reynobond having a class 0 for the purposes of fire performance, although I did not know the technicalities associated with this. After that, whether or not the product could be used for a specific project was a matter for the customer to determine based upon their detailed knowledge of the project and the relevant building regulations. I did not have any knowledge of the building regulations or associated guidance, and would expect the customer to review the BBA certificate to the extent necessary to make a decision. And was the reference to in the certificate, which we will see in a moment, was the reference in the certificate to class 0 the relevant feature of the certificate in supporting your sales of Reynobond PE 55?
Yes, that's the general thing that most people spoke about and referred to.
So more so than wind loading or moisture resistance, is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you agree that if a customer were using the BBA certificate to make a decision about whether they could use PE called Reynobond PE 55, that the certificate should have the correct information on it about everything about it?
Yes, I would assume that that was correct.
Would you agree that in those circumstances the BBA certificate should have complete information on it and not miss anything important out?
Yes, but that's for people that are writing the documents to determine what goes in there. That's not something I can make comment on.
Did you assume when you were using this document that the BBA certificate had both the correct information and the complete information on it?
Yes, I would have done.
Can we look at paragraph 56 of your statement, please, at page 16, the second statement? You say at paragraph 56, in the second line, however, I can see that by reading the certificate again now, that the product may be regarded as having NC 0 classification, that's national class 0, I think, classification, and that in respect of fire performance, there are conditions confirming that only particular colours have received the relevant classifications, and that other colours may not and must be confirmed by test or assessment. Then at 57, you say, I was not aware of any discrepancy between the content of Arconic's BBA certificate and the product supplied by Arconic. Neither was I aware of any issue or problem with Arconic's BBA certificate. Now, before I ask you a little bit more about what you say there, can we look at the certificate itself? This is BBA 6047. And we can see there that at the top right-hand corner, this is indeed certificate number 08/4510. And just taking it steadily, product sheet 1 says Reynobond architecture wall cladding panels. Product scope and summary of certificate. This certificate of confirmation relates to Reynobond architecture wall cladding panels, aluminium/polyethylene composite panels used to provide a decorative/protective facade over the external walls of buildings. See that? And at the bottom of that page, if you could just be shown the bottom of page 1, you can see the date. It's 14th of January 2008, signed by Greg Cooper. You see that?
Yes.
We go up then to the heading, key factors assessed, which you can see at the top of the screen in front of you. It says in the third item, behaviour in relation to fire. In relation to the building regulations for reaction to fire, the panels may be regarded as having a Class 0 surface in England and Wales and a low risk material in Scotland. See section 6. And just note the words, please, if you would. The panels, you see that? The panels may be regarded. And also note the words may be regarded as having a Class 0 surface. So I'm going to ask you some questions about that language. But if you go over to section 6 as directed by page 1 here, you'll see that on page 5. And this is entitled Behaviour in Relation to Fire. And at paragraph 6.1, and I'll read this slowly, it says this: a standard sample of the product with a grey-green Duragloss 5000 coating, when tested for reaction to fire, achieved a classification of B S2 D0 in accordance with EN 13501 Part 1 2002. A fire retardant sample of the product with a gold-coloured Duragloss finish, when tested for reaction to fire, achieved a classification B S1 D0 in accordance with EN 13501 2002. Paragraph 6.2. A fire retardant sample of the product with a metallic grey PVDF finish, when tested in accordance with BS 476 Part 6 1989, achieved a fire propagation index I of 0, and when tested in accordance with BS 476 Part 7 1997, achieved a Class 1 surface spread of flame. Paragraph 6.3. As a consequence of section 6.1 and 6.2, the products may be regarded as having a Class 0 surface in relation to the approved document B of the Building Regulations 2000 as amended England and Wales, and technical booklet E of the Building Regulations Northern Ireland 2000 as amended, and a low risk material as defined in Annex 2C and Annex 2E of the Building Scotland Regulations 2004 as amended. The unexposed side of the products may also be regarded as having a Class 0 surface. And then 6.4 says these performances may not be achieved by other colours of the product, and the designations of a particular colour should be confirmed by, and then there are some tests identified below it. Now, just pausing there, can we take it from your witness statement, Ms. French, that you believed that the certificate said that the products were Class 0?
Yes.
What were the products?
Reynobond 55.
PE and FR?
My recollection at the time was PE and FR.
Right. Let's just look at the wording of the certificate a little bit more closely. It says under paragraph 6.3, if we go to page 5 where we were, and again on page 1, which summarises it, it says that as a consequence of section 6.1 and 6.2, the products may be regarded as having a Class 0 surface. Did you notice when you reviewed this certificate, either at the time Mr. Verley asked you to, when it was in draft, or at any time later, that it said that Reynobond may be regarded as having Class 0, not that it was Class 0?
No, as I say, I didn't have enough technical knowledge at the time to, or knowledge of a BBA certificate to look at that.
See, in your statement, you say it was Class 0, and I just want to explore that understanding. Did you ever consider the expression the products may be regarded as having a Class 0 surface? Did you ever think to yourself what those words might mean?
No.
Did the question ever occur to you that it might mean that might be Class 0 or might not be Class 0, or that there maybe have to be a test or something like that?
No, that document would have been given to other people in the chain, and it would have been for them to, they've got the technical knowledge to have decided whether it was suitable for what they were doing or not.
Did you ever point out the wording in the certificate here, may be regarded as having a Class 0 surface, to your customers?
No, I would have just passed the document on for them to read it and digest it and make the necessary, pull the necessary information out of it.
Did any of your customers, do you ever remember, ask you, what do these words mean? What does may be regarded as having a Class 0 surface mean?
No, I don't recall them asking those questions.
Do you remember ever having a discussion with anybody, either in Arconic or outside Arconic, about that turn of phrase or what it might mean?
No, I don't.
Do we take it from your evidence that you thought that those words meant these products have Class 0?
Yes, that's my understanding of it.
Can we also take it from your witness statement that you weren't aware of what documents, whether test reports or classification reports, supported any claim that Reynobond PE was capable of being regarded as having a Class 0 surface?
Sorry, say that again.
Can we take it from your evidence, your witness statements, that you weren't aware of any documents, whether they're test reports or classification reports, which supported the claim that Reynobond PE was capable of being regarded as, or could be regarded as, having a Class 0 surface?
No, it was the BBA and the some of the product data sheets.
You say some of the product data sheets produced by Arconic?
Yes, I believe so.
So my question again, did you ever see any underlying test data, test reports, classification reports which supported the claim to Class 0?
I don't recall seeing anything. I think there were occasions possibly that I was sent some information with certainly the ARUP email from earlier that had documentation to it, that would have had the information that I wasn't allowed to pass on, that would have had information on there, I believe.
What was the information? Do you remember?
I can't remember, no.
Did you read that information?
Again, I don't recall doing that.
When Claude
Probably would have read it, but not necessarily. I couldn't act on that because I didn't have enough technical knowledge to be able to act on it. I would have probably read it, but not necessarily understood it or been able to make technical or been able to comment on it.
did you ask Claude Verlet, or even ask yourself, well, what is it that I'm not allowed to tell my customers?
No, I wouldn't have done that. Sorry, did I miss a question?
I don't think so. You say, I wouldn't have done that. My question was, did you ask Claude Verlet, or even ask yourself, what is it that I'm not allowed to tell my customers? And you say, you answered a moment ago, no, I wouldn't have done that. And my question is, why not?
Because he's got far more knowledge about it than I ever have, and so no, I don't believe I would have asked that question.
I wonder to yourself what it was that Claude Verlet wanted you to keep a secret from your customer.
I'm not sure I would refer it as a secret. It was probably, I would necessarily thought about it as company information that they didn't want, being divulged to customers in the way that it was written on that document.
There come a time when you became aware that Arconic was in possession of technical data about the fire performance of Reynobond 55, PE or FR, that Arconic had but didn't want its customers to see.
Was I aware?
Yes.
No, I don't believe so.
Not even from that email exchange we saw. Oh my lord.
No, not at all. No.
Going back to the line of questioning we were on, were you ever made aware, whether by Mr. Verlet or anybody else at Arconic, that you were selling Reynobond in circumstances where there had been no test on Reynobond 55 with a PE core, which showed that it met class 0?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Would you agree that that was an important fact to you, for you to have known?
Yes.
Is that a fact that you would have expected Arconic to have told you?
Again, I wouldn't have had the knowledge to know exactly what I should know and what I shouldn't know. So I take the information that I'm given, I pass it on to my customers, and then they make the calls and assess the information in the way that they need to for their projects and their work.
I understand that, but given that you agree that the absence of any test on Reynobond 55 with the PE core, showing it to meet class 0, was an important thing for you to know, does it follow from that, and I suggest it must follow from that, that that was something that you would have expected Arconic at least to have told you?
Yes.
You can't think of any reason, can you, sitting there today, why they would have kept you in the dark about that?
No, not at all.
If it's correct that in fact PE core Reynobond 55 had never been subjected to a test under the relevant British standards that achieved class 0, on what basis did you understand that Reynobond PE core could be regarded as having a class 0 certificate, class 0 classification?
Again, I wouldn't be able to, I haven't got the technical knowledge to know what they would have done to actually gain those certifications.
How much attention did you really pay to the fire safety of Reynobond 55 when you were selling it to your customers?
Not very much. It was very, very, very rare for a customer to raise any questions about it. It was not something that was discussed. The majority of what I dealt with was colours, availabilities, and those types of things. It was the detail of fire was not part of the discussions.
Do you accept that if it's correct that the claim that PE core Reynobond 55 could be regarded as class 0 was false? If that was correct, then the claim made to that effect in the Bba certificate would tend to mislead customers.
Again, I can't comment on that because I just don't, I don't raise the documents and I don't have the right technical background to be able to give a definite yes or no answer to that. But
well, Ms. French, forgive me for disagreeing with you about that, but you were the salesperson responsible at Arconic for selling Reynobond PE55. If you were selling that product based upon claims made about its fire performance in the Bba Certificate, those claims were not in fact supported by any test. Do you agree that you would be tending to mislead buyers?
yes, I wouldn't have knowingly, I wouldn't have done that, but yes, inadvertently it would have been.
Can you explain how it was that you were put in a position whereby you were given a document to give to customers which made false claims about whether or not PE55 was supported by a test to class 0?
No, I can't.
Let's go back to the certificate, 761. I'm sorry, the reference is BBA 6047. Thank you very much. You can see there's a reference to PE called Reynobond with a grey-green coating, Duragloss 5000, achieving a BS2 D0 classification in accordance with EN 13501 Part 1, 2002. Now that's the European classification system. And here it is in a document that you were going to be using to your English market. Did you, at the time, consider the European classifications relevant to your work?
No.
Did you not ask somebody why it was that this certificate, so important to your work, as you said, in selling Reynobond 55 to the UK market, contained anything about the Euro classifications if they weren't relevant?
No, I didn't.
Why not?
As I say, it was not something that was ever asked. I didn't get questioned about it, and it didn't occur to me to ask and query it.
It surely would have occurred to you, given that somebody in Arconic had decided that the BBA certificate should say something about Euro classifications, that indeed the UK market did want to know about those Euro classifications. Otherwise, what was the point of saying anything about it in this document?
As I say, I used the document to pass the information on to customers for them to look at. It's not something that I haven't got that technical background, and it's not something that I looked at in great detail.
You say in great detail. Did you look at it at all?
Yes, I looked at it, but I wouldn't have questioned. As I say, I didn't question about why it had got the reference to European norms in there.
Were you aware of the documents that supported the claim made here that PE called Reynobond with a grey-green coating achieved BS2 D0 in accordance with the European classification scheme?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Were you aware of the documents that supported the claim made here that PE called Reynobond with a grey-green coating achieved a BS2 D0 classification in accordance with the European fire classification scheme?
No, I wasn't.
Did you ever ask for them?
No.
Were you ever made aware?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I sense that you're putting a case to Ms. French that ought to be put clearly, if it's going to be part of a submission at a later stage, to the effect that she should have taken the initiative in challenging her employers to produce test data to support what was in an apparently official certificate. Is that what you're putting to her?
And I'm not. I'm just seeking to explore precisely how aware Ms. French was of what underlay these claims. The responsibility for the technical data included in this document is very likely to have been a matter for other witnesses, whether we have all the witnesses or not.
That's how it occurred to me, but it was just that some of the questions seemed to be suggesting that she should have taken a course which she perhaps didn't take and is to be criticised for it. But if that's not what you're putting, then you've allayed my concerns.
I'm not putting it at this stage, which is the early stages, but there may come a time, Mr. Chairman, when that question becomes slightly more slightly more pertinent, and I'm not sure I want to get into a debate at this point.
No, you take your own course.
At this point, Mr. Chairman, I am only asking her about what she knew and what underlay these documents. Ms. French, I'm sorry to have engaged in this debate. I hope there was nothing unclear about what I was putting to you. But let me try and put it a slightly different way. Were you ever told that the test result identified in the certificate, and perhaps we should look back at it, please. That's BBA 6047. Paragraph 6.1. Were you ever told that the achievement of a classification of BS2D0 was only achieved by PE called ACM in rivet fix?
No.
Did you know that at the same time as PE called ACM in rivet fix achieved the BS2D0 classification, Arconic had also performed a European test on cassette fix?
I'm aware of it now, but I wasn't overly aware. I don't recall it at the time.
Would it follow that at the time you were also not aware that the test on the cassette fix variant under the European test regime was terminated before the test came to an end because the heat release became too high?
No, I wouldn't have been aware of any of that. As I say, I don't have the knowledge to understand all of that.
Would it follow, and I suppose it would, that the effect of that failure or that result was that there was no classification for PE called Reynobond in cassette fix?
Again, I can't answer that because I wasn't close enough and wouldn't have known the detail enough to know whether it was or whether it did or it didn't.
Were you ever told, doing the best you can with your recollection, were you ever told that people in Arconic had decided to ignore the results of the cassette test on PE called Reynobond 55 and say that all Reynobond PE core, whether rivet or cassette fix, achieved Class B S2D0?
No.
As far as we've been able to find out, Ms. French, nobody in Arconic ever told the BBA about that cassette test which failed. Did you know that?
No.
In those early years, did you understand that there was any difference at all in fire performance for PE as between the cassette fix variant and the rivet fix variant?
No.
If it's true that the cassette variant of Reynobond 55 PE core are not only not achieved a Euro Class B, but in fact had the test stopped early and was unclassified, would you agree, if that's true, would you agree that there was a very serious omission for your purposes in the BBA certificate?
Well, yes, because it wouldn't have been, yes.
And that omission would have made the certificate significantly misleading for your customers?
Yes.
Do you also agree that by stating, as it does, and we can look at it again if you like, that a standard sample of the product had achieved a Class B, that would lead buyers to think that the Class B applied both to the rivet and to the cassette variant?
Yes.
Are you able to account for how such a significantly false and misleading document, on the hypothesis I'm putting to you, was allowed to be put to the market in the UK through this?
No, I don't.
Are you able to account for how it was never withdrawn or corrected for almost a decade following its issue in the January of 2008?
No, I can't.
I'm going to show you some of the testing documents to see if you recognise any of them. And Ms. French, forgive me for this, and I strongly suspect from your evidence so far that we can take this quite quickly. Can we look at ARC 50358? This is the CSTB test report with classification number RA05305A. And we call this test 5A as a shorthand. And you can see from the title that it's to the European standard NF EN 13501 Part 1. And you can also, you can't see, but take it from me that this was performed on PE cord Reynobond with a rivet fix, and it's dated the 7th of January 2005. If we look at page 2, under product description, we can see at the bottom that it was Duraglass 4000 Duraglass 5000 with a colour grey-green. And if we go to page 4, we can see the classification, BS 2D0. You see that there. And underneath that, under section 4.3, it says, under the second bullet point down, only for the system riveted on any metallic substructure. Now, my first question is, during your time at Arconic, did you ever see this document?
I don't recall seeing it, no.
Can we look at ARC 50536, please? This is another CSTB document, this time called RA05355B, tested to the same European standards. And this was a test performed at around the same time as the one on the rivet fix, but this was done on the cassette fix PE cord Reynobond. And if we can go to page 7, please, you can see the comments. 630 seconds ignition inside the cassette in the angle, about 700 seconds large ignition inside the cassettes, 850 seconds stop of the main burner because HRR, heat release rate, exceeded 400 kilowatts. And then in bold, the test was stopped after 850 seconds. The results are not usable to give an idea of the fire behavior of the product. And on page 10, there are some images. You can take it from me that these are the PE cord tests that existed, as far as we know, to the European classification at the time of the Bba certificate. Again, is this a document you've ever seen before? Or saw in your time during Arconic?
No, I haven't.
Now let's look at the test report for the FR panel in the gold colour. If we go to BBA 408288, this is test RA060372, and it's dated the 19th of October 2006, and it's done on Reynobond FR. Again, is this document a document that you saw at all during your time at Arconic?
No.
Are these documents that you would have been able to access if you'd wanted to see them?
I can't. I don't know, because I don't know where they were stored.
Did any of your customers ever ask to see the tests underlying the claims made in the Bba certificate about the fire performance either of PE or FR?
No, the only documents I was ever asked for were for the Bba document.
Does it follow from that no customers ever ask you to justify the claims in the Bba certificate at paragraph 6.1 or indeed 6.2 about
Not that I can recall, no.
If they had asked you to justify the claims made, what would you have sent?
I would have posed the question over to the technical team and asked them for a response. It's not something I would have answered myself.
Right. Now, going back to your statement, you can go back to it if you like. It was at paragraph 56 in the second sentence. Perhaps we should just do that. If we go back to your second statement, page 16, please, paragraph 56. Thank you. In the second sentence, you see, we read it together earlier. You say, I can see by reading the certificate again now that the product may be regarded as having NC 0 classification, and in respect to fire performance, there are conditions confirming that only particular colours have received the relevant classifications, and that other colours may not and must be confirmed by test assessment, you say that. Can we go back to the certificate then, at page 5, BBA 6047, page 5. You can see paragraph 6.4 that I read to you, and also 6.5, where it says, for resistance to fire, the performance of a wall incorporating the product can only be determined by tests from a suitably accredited laboratory and is not covered by this certificate. I've shown you all that again. My questions are, what colour range or colours specifically did you think were covered by the BBA certificate?
Well, at the time of using the certificate, again, I would have just passed the information on to a customer, and any questions they had from it, then they would have asked me, and I would have sought that information for them.
Was the colour restriction stated on the face of the certificate something that you appreciated when distributing certificates, BBA certificates to customers?
No, I don't recall it was.
Did you ever have a discussion with anybody at Arconic about whether and the extent to which perhaps this qualification limited the sales of products?
No.
Did you ever have a discussion with any customer about whether or not the qualification or caveat in the certificate meant that they might not be able to buy the colour they wanted?
No.
So does it follow from that that, to all intents and purposes, these warnings about colours were simply ignored in your dealings with customers and your dealings internally at Arconic?
I didn't get, as I say, if any questions that arose out of the BBA, then I would have passed them to our technical team for responses. We very rarely got asked any questions about the BBA.
Do I take it from that you never said to any customers, look, the colours you want aren't covered by this certificate, you'll need to do a test?
No, I didn't.
And why is that, given what the certificate says? Why didn't you have that?
Again, I come back to again that very rarely I asked any questions about the fire implications on the BBA, or generally there was just no discussions about fire performance.
You would be asked routinely, is this right, for colours other than grey, green or gold?
Yeah, all the time.
And in those all the time instances, you would provide the BBA certificate, yes?
Yes.
When you were doing so, did you not point out that the colours that your customer wanted, other than the grey, green and the gold, were not covered by the certificate?
No.
Did you think all the colours were included?
No, but as I say, I'd passed the document on, and any questions they'd had, they'd come back to me on it. But no, I didn't highlight that it was specifically for 2 colours.
So you, for a number of years, sold all the colours in the range, using the BBA certificate as a means to achieve those sales, without ever having a conversation one way or the other about whether the colours were covered by the certificate or not. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't recall having those conversations.
What was the purpose of the qualification in relation to these colours if they simply didn't feature in the discussions that you had either with your customers or internally at Arconic?
I don't know, I can't answer that.
Did you ever ask yourself that question?
No.
Did you ever wonder why it was that there were these qualifications in respect of these colours?
No.
Were you ever asked by a customer in the UK to provide materials so that they could do a full-scale test of their chosen colour?
No.
We're on, I think, page 5 of the BBA certificate. Can we go back to page 3, please? BBA 6047, page 3. Now, you can see here that under paragraph 1, description, it says, under the more general heading, technical specification, paragraph 1.1, the Reynobond architectural wall cladding panels comprise two 0.5mm thick aluminium alloy sheets, etc., bonded to either side of a core of low-density polyethylene, LDPE. The panels are available either plain-edged riveted system or flanged cassette system to suit architectural requirements. See Figure 1. And if you look down the page, to the bottom of the page, you'll see Figure 1. And that is entitled Reynobond Architecture Panels and Typical Fixing Systems. And then there are two diagrams. There's the riveted system on the left and the cassette system on the right. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you accept that Figure 1 in its entirety, read together with the statements about fire performance that we've looked at in detail in section 6 of the certificate, would lead the customer to think that both fixing systems were covered by the statement that PE standard achieved a Euro Class B?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes. Do you accept that this diagram, this figure, when you read them together with the statements about fire performance in section 6, would lead the customer reading this to think that both fixing systems, cassette and rivet, are covered by the claim that PE standard achieved a Euro Class B fire classification?
Yes.
And do you accept that that was in fact completely false?
From the information you're talking about, well, yes.
And we've seen the certificate, or the test result for cassette, test 5B, which showed that cassette had failed the Euro fire classification test. If it's right that it had done so, then it would follow, wouldn't it, that the customer would be misled into thinking that both systems, both fixing systems, were Class B, when in fact only the rivet was.
Yes.
And far from this certificate saying that cassette would perform differently from what the certificate says in section 6, it's actually representing positively that it would perform in the same way, isn't it? Do you accept that?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we're coming to a different topic. I'm 3 minutes short of 4:30. I'm very happy to continue a little bit longer to make a little bit more progress to get to a more convenient point in about 10 minutes.
Well, Mr. Millett, I know we lost time at the beginning of the day, which was unfortunate, but I think if we start running over 4:30 for what is projected to be 10 minutes, we'll find we're running later and later. So I think we'd be wiser to take a break at that point.
Very good, Mr. Chairman. I'm in your hands. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for raising it. Well, as you can hear, Ms. French, we're going to break for the day now. It won't surprise you to know that we have to ask you to come back with some more questions tomorrow. We'll resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, please. And again, I remind you, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it overnight.
Okay.
All right?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we'll look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for everyone else, 10 o'clock tomorrow, please. Good. Thank you very much.